Good morning. Good morning. It's good to be back. It's good to be back from Africa. That was a long trip. Tammy and I want to just give you a report of what happened while we were there. This time we went to hold a 20-team soccer tournament and to do a lot of evangelistic meetings off of that outreach. And James asked me, on a scale of 1 to 10, what did it meet your expectations? What happened? And I told him I would call it a 12 instead of 1 through 10. Every time God shows up, he always shows off. And he always surpasses anything that we can imagine that Scripture talks about. But can we start? There we go. This is our team that went with us. We had lots of young people this time, and 10 of the young people, our youngest was 17, and our oldest was, I guess, me. But it was amazing. We had a lot of 20-somethings, professional 20-somethings, an engineer, a pilot, a nurse, and it was just amazing what God did through them and what they were able to do. This is a plane. We almost didn't make our plane. We had all kinds of trouble. 2 days before we were to leave, both of our cars broke down in big ways. So we're scrambling, trying to find out how we're going to get to the airport. On top of that, I had fraud on 2 credit cards that I was going to use. So I'm scrambling with that. The day we were to leave, there were tremendous storms on the East Coast. And so several of our team couldn't get into Chicago. And so the main group who came with Nathan and most of our supplies and really kind of the brains of what we're trying to do there didn't get there until we were boarding the plane. And we didn't know how they were going to get through security because they didn't have their tickets because they closed the ticket counter at the Swiss Airlines. So it was just amazing, God getting us there. I was frustrated, to say the least. But we took up the 4 center aisles of this plane and had a wonderful time. When we got there, we met this guy. We can never find a vehicle this big, and this guy shows up with this vehicle. Now we had almost 40 bags with us from 17 people, so it was amazing. So we're doing the Africa thing and throwing luggage up on top. Now the miracle of the first day there was that this driver was a new cabbie in Nairobi, and he turns to me and says, "Do you know how to get across to the city where you're staying tonight?" Thank God that Verizon and GPS worked that night.
And they're always very optimistic about the packing, because first they try to put all of our suitcases in the back of that and then have room for us. Well, that didn't work, obviously, so it all had to go up on top. But they're always very optimistic about our baggage. This is on the trip. We took a bus the next morning. We stayed all night in Nairobi. And then we took a bus the next morning, and we did a lot of our shopping on the way. We picked up 12 live chickens and lots of fruits and vegetables, and they barter for them along the way. There's a lot of little stands and things like that where people sell things because they know this is the main road going through, and there's a lot of traffic, so they sell a lot of things. And we got everything from our vegetables to our chickens to fruit all along the side of the road. A lot of our traveling is done in smaller vans. So this was the bulk of the team. And then because some of us are a little older, they let us travel not so packed in the car sometimes. So, because it gets packed in there. But there's a typical road going down, and that's a pretty smooth one. Actually, some of the roads were smoother there than what I travel on a bus in northern Missouri, but not all of them. Some of them were not great.
There we go.
One of the things that we did and that we always do and try to focus on is with the widows. And so we've got a few pictures here of some of the things that we did with the widows. This time we took them skirts. As you can see, they're all dressed in blue. And so they have, the gal that sews has made them clothes, and she's made, a lot of them have these blue dresses, but they were really, really excited to get these beautiful new skirts. And we also painted their fingernails. We try to do something special with them because over there they're kind of the cast-offs. And so we try to really do something special with them. And so we painted their fingernails, and they love bright colors. And so they're showing that off there. They're pretty proud of their yellow and orange, pink and purple. Before we ever get started, though, they like to share with us. We introduce ourselves, and then they talk and just are grateful and thankful for what Alpha does over there for them. Alpha, they use loosely. They started with the Alpha teachings, but they continue in their teachings, and they still continue to call it Alpha. But so Alpha provides for them weekly teaching on a weekly basis. It also provides them monthly food supplies and clothing and jobs and cows, and teaches them to sew and different things like that. And they're just really, really grateful for that, because a lot of them have been taken off the streets and been able to have a shelter built for them, a small home, and they're grateful for that. And we always share with them, because we're the ones who come bringing stuff, and the money, but we always share with them that we get to be the ones to bring it, but that there is a body of believers across the United States that loves them and cares for them and provides for them. And they are grateful, and they would like us to give you their greetings and their love and their thanks for your support.
We've been able to get, I'm just going to change, James, it keeps going on. We've been able to get 51 widows off the streets, and that's pretty amazing. We got to counting how many cows we have, because about 2009 when we started buying some cows, indigenous cows over there, and started reproducing and stuff. And so we have over 40 cows. Of course, they're not all in one spot, and I'd be hard-pressed to find all of them at one time. But the one lady who stood up is 106 years old, and she was excited.
And one of the gals is a Muslim convert, and she was loved into the kingdom of God because they loved on her and provided for her. And so we also provide them some food supplies. They do this on a monthly basis, but we got to be there for that this time and have a lot of interesting things that they
That is because they milk. The easiest way to support a widow is if I buy them a milk cow and they sell milk. And so that's udder cream that they'll use when they milk so that the udders don't crack and they can stay healthy. The Muslim woman was coming to Bible studies and was getting a lot of flack and abuse and beaten every once in a while. And so I went down to the market and I found the biggest cow I could find, the healthiest, fattest cow I could find. And we led that cow over to her family, who was all out setting. And I told her that Jesus blessed her with a cow because she loves Jesus. Muhammad didn't do this, Jesus did. And they took notice immediately because that was a tremendous blessing for that family to have a cow.
Here they are with you can see the bags on top of their head. They put this is interesting because now in Kenya they don't have plastic bags. They have these mesh bags that fall apart because they're biodegradable, but they're not very strong. But anyway, they stack this and carry it on their heads. This is my friend Chris over there next to me, and she's gone with us all but once or twice of the times that I've gotten to go. But these are some of the wives. The one right next to me is Pastor Alex's wife, Lorna. And next to her in the red, her name is Alice, and she is a wife to Pastor Samuel, who interprets for us and is a part of our team and just a really cool guy. And the other one was Wycliffe's wife, and he's one of like Alex's second-hand man. We spent a lot of time playing with the kids because over there they don't get a lot of time and attention because people are working and busy and trying to keep food on the table. And so they really appreciate us playing with them. And these are the kinds of things that they entertain themselves with. They do not have toy boxes full of toys. They just don't. And you can't see because that picture's cut off, but he's sitting on a tire that he's been rolling around. This is Wycliffe. He's the one who helps Pastor Alex. And sometimes when you meet people, you know the Spirit of God's on them and hear their testimonies, and he's one of those special guys too. This is Pastor Peter's family, which is Pastor Alex's brother, but he's a pastor of one of the churches too, and they have recently gotten into the pig business. And that's Porky, Pokey, Pinky. Chris and I named them.
Okay.
The pigs, yeah. They don't name their animals over there either. And Chris and I are on a motorbike. We're not driving, but we're riding, going to a women's conference.
One of the miracles we saw was a lady that and her husband came for help. She had triplets, and that's just really unheard of over there, to even survive. And they're 3 healthy babies, and this is Mama, and these are 2 older daughters and her babies. And so we set up to help them buy formula and so forth, and through our medical clinic receive care and treatment, get some vitamins.
You can't see this picture either, but we took some simple books that my sister-in-law had sent that, I don't know if she made them or somebody did, but they were just cut out pictures of all different kinds of animals. And I'm thinking, oh, brother, that's great. But the kids loved them, and they loved practicing their English and identifying the animals, and they had a good time with those.
This is a group of boys that we ran across going to, in the soccer tournament, we had 4 different sites, and we kind of took a break here. They were trying to to trade both their mules for our car. We were having a lot of fun with that. But they were back there harvesting some maize. This is Kibera slums. It's the largest slums in the continent of Africa. And in 1 square mile, there's about 500,000 people. When you go to Kibera slums, the first time I was there is in 2008, and I was helping another ministry, and they were looking for volunteers to come and do compassionate care. I thought, compassionate care, that can't be too bad. So we show up with our team. Our job was to go through the slums and pick up the dead and take them out to the cemetery and have a Christian burial for them. So that created a lot of intense conversations really quick about having to go around and pick up dead people.
You can see the water running through there. I mean, sewage and stuff just runs through.
We started digging for water up in Turkana, so about 12 hours away from where our headquarters is in Turkana is the Turkana tribe. And be 2 years old, we planted a church up there, bought some desert, some land, built a church. And as we're trying to find water, and we've dug 3 test holes, we were having some issues. And some of that has to do with the quality of the people you hire. You don't know their education level and their experience level and stuff like that. One of the individuals that we took with us was a 28-year-old engineer that works in Wichita and works in the floodplains of the United States. And he was able to come, and while we were up there, the way God would provide, I really don't think God wanted us to find water yet. While we were, Nathan and some of them flew up there, and then they had about a 3-hour ride into the desert. As they were going, all of a sudden they found themselves on a road. There never had been a road up there. Someone had taken a grader and graded a road. what had been taking place way farther north in Turkana was because of the lack of water and grass, a lot of the shepherds and the nomadic people were bleeding over into Uganda and Somalia and so forth, and there was a lot of conflict between the countries, and so the government started digging some wells up there. So as they were trying to get up there, they saw that there was a building out in the middle of nowhere, and so they decided to grade a road for us. And while they were up there, the engineer was able to talk to the NGO that the Kenya government had hired to dig wells for them, and so free of charge, they were coming back into that area and going to set up the other crazy miraculous thing is I forget how much we paid for that little bit of land. The village elders came to us and said, we'll give you 2 square miles of land so that you can find water. They're willing to give us land because we can't dig on something that we don't own. And so they're going to set up a grid and dig, I think, 24 different test holes. So in the meantime, we took a 3,000 liter tank up there. And one of the things that everybody saw, so kind of let you see where we're at. So this, where's Nairobi? Here's Nairobi, the capital we fly into. We have an 8-hour ride to Webuye, and then the church we planted is up here. We fly into Lodwar, which is the farthest north town, and then we drive 3 hours up here. So up here's where we're digging wells. One of the things that amazed them was we were able to buy a whole bunch of life straws because of the gifts. And the life straws are extremely life-saving. The people thought it was a miracle. They could take their brown, nasty water and put it through a life straw and squeeze it, and the water came out pure. They'd never seen anything like that. And so we were able to leave many, many life straws up there. Strategically planted those with the women that had children or were pregnant, and then gave straws to the men who aren't around a lot because they're off with the livestock, which is mainly goats. So no matter where they found themselves, they were just digging holes in the river, and the water would seep up through and drink that. So they were just extremely thankful. This is our building. We got to build onto our building. It's completely packed. The church has just exploded up there. Because of what we're doing, and it's just full. There's no chairs. There's no place for anything. It's just a wonderful problem to have. But they're so excited about what God is doing. One of the things that we do is that we are in 7 prisons up there providing discipleship courses. An Alpha course, I work for Alpha, so it's a 15-week general discipleship course in basic Christianity. And we opened up 2 new prisons. This is a women's prison, and we'll get to the men's prison in a minute. But they gave me a report back of how many people we have discipled. And we just have gone over 5,000 men and women who went through a 15-week discipleship course. We're just so excited about that. The women didn't have anything. It's a new prison they opened up. It's not very big. They got excited. They grabbed Tammy. This is Tammy over here. And picked her up and started carrying her around dancing. That was way out of Tammy's comfort zone.
Yeah.
She had never been in a mosh pit before.
It's like, help me.
She was a little tamer growing up than I was. So we bought some TVs and DVD players so they could do training there, and just took them some basic toiletries for them to have. This is the men's facility, and you'll see some men in normal clothes, and then you'll see men in striped shirts and pants. That's because in Kenya, that if you're arrested, that you go to prison or jail until you go to trial. It's completely different than the United States. You're not guilty. You're not innocent until you're proven guilty. You're guilty until you prove your innocence. So there's lots of men and women in prison that just haven't even gone to trial yet. This is our one of our clinics. We have 3 medical clinics, And it was wonderful. This little girl here just finished her nursing degree. And when we showed up, there wasn't a lot of people standing outside. There were a few. And this man is in here. We can't see it, but he's got an IV hanging up there on a nail. When they found out a Mzungu was there, which is a white person, they went and told everybody wants to be treated by a Mzungu. So all of a sudden, business picked up really heavily that day. But this is one of our nurses. Oh, I don't know where that got thrown in there. This is a typical soccer ball. They make their soccer balls out of plastic and string, and that's what they have to play with. And one of the things we were able to do was take those soccer balls that were indestructible, that Coca-Cola made, and to give one to each of the 20 teams that participated in the tournament. You want to talk about this?
This is just some pictures I snapped where one of the tournament fields was a school, and they were on break. But this is a typical classroom. And they pulled those desks out and used them for bleachers for people to sit on, but very plain, simple blackboard.
These are pictures from several different fields. So we had 4 different fields. We were playing 5 games a day on 4 different fields, 20 games a day. We were playing for 3 days, and then the last day we brought in the 4 top teams to play the championship matches and for 3rd and 4th place. The really cool thing was, I have no idea how people got there. 2 fields were close to Webuye, the others were about 30 miles away, and people just showed up. We had a team come as far as Mombasa, which is completely on the other side of the country, 8 hours east of Nairobi. So they had to ride a bus 15 to 20 hours, depending on how the bus got there, to come to play in this tournament. And they were Muslims. It was a wonderful time. Each of the teams, the 20 teams, had a chaplain. So we assigned a pastor when I went there earlier. We have 85 pastors that come together in a prayer time every week. And we assigned pastors to each team to be with them. And so each day, a chaplain was there with the team to encourage them, to teach them. And this is one of the fields. We probably averaged, they think, around 200 to 300 people per game, per field. And on the last day, we had over 3,000 people come. So we were very busy. It was fun when they scored a goal that the villages would come in. It's no different than like Mound City showing up to a state tournament, and they close down the town and the school and everybody comes to the game. So the villages would come and follow their team, and it was fun when they would, I don't know a whole lot about soccer, but anyway, the way they celebrate when they score a goal, the whole village, everyone came to watch them, would run on the field and celebrate with them. So it kind of delayed things sometimes, but we had lots of fun. This is a video. So at halftime of the games, the entertainment was to watch white people dance.
To Kenyan music.
And we gave new meaning to America's Got Talent. So they had lots of fun. They would just bring us up from sitting on the sidelines and make fun of us and make us dance. But they really enjoyed that.
I think the team enjoyed it just as much, too. They had fun. That girl's saying, they can't dance.
Each of the teams, like I said, we had 20 teams. We had a team from 50 miles away, Mamias. Bungoma is a region. It'd be the equivalent of about 5 of our counties. And so we had a team from every area of Bungoma.
I think that's the finals team.
Yes,
yeah.
These 2 teams played in the finals. We were fortunate that the officials, when I got there, in Eldoret, the National Association of Officiating was training and licensing officials, soccer officials in Eldoret. So what we were able to do was hire these people and give them experience to come and officiate. So we had real professional officials at our games, which helped with some of the controversy that we had at times.
Those are school desks there for bleachers. We had lots of opportunities to just share, and this is my friend Chris's husband, and he was really good about just asking people, if they knew Jesus, and if they said they did or were as a Christian, he would ask them, to tell him about that, and he just had a really good way of engaging. And
he's a school teacher in Ohio. These are the pastors that gather together for prayer. Every Thursday they come together, start at 4 o'clock and go till 8 o'clock and pray together. We were able to buy some more Bibles and pass out. They're really needed. This boy here at the left, this is in 2008. This is a picture of a Polaroid that he had, that Nathan must have given him. And he came from Nairobi, traveled all out there to see us again. And to talk to us. We were just amazed. We had a retired professional soccer player with us. He had played in Germany for 9 years. He was born in Ecuador, an American citizen. He came with us, him and his wife, and so we were able to do a lot of clinics, and that drew lots of people to come over. And each time we begin and we end with a lesson and talk about the gospel. This is our last slide. I want to talk about him. We get there the next day, Sunday, and we're there, and they introduce a lot of people. This is a church, our last church building that we're building. And he sat down beside me up front. I didn't know who he was, or at least I didn't remember who he was. And they introduced him, and he was Pastor Alex, who I'd worked with for years. He was the one who led him to Christ. And in 2005, he was with Alex when he was praying and had his vision about a white man coming to Africa to bless his village. And so they take me outside and to an interpreter. He says he wanted to talk to me. And I said, okay. And he said, this is Patrick Juma. Patrick Juma was a part of the East African Evangelistic Association. And him and a group of men have planted over 700 churches on the eastern side of Africa. And so he came up to me and said, God told me to come and thank you. So I'm here to thank you. And he goes, now I can die. And I said, what? I thought I misheard something. And I really didn't want to be the cause of anybody's death. But anyway, he had made the trip from the eastern side of Mombasa over here, and God told me to meet him again, and he thanked us for planting all the churches that we have planted and working with Alex. And he said, now that I've done what God has told me to do, he says I can go die. So I'm really not sure what that meant. I hope it's not what he's saying, but it just really touched me that God would send somebody on a journey to say thank you. And we have one more slide of this video of us dancing. That's not too bad for white people. Bryce used to have moves like that in high school. I remember Bryce. You and me on the dance floor. People would stop and watch us and laugh too. That's okay, thanks. But we want to thank you for all your support. It was just amazing. I want to end with a story.
Okay. I just want to say thank you, too. Thank you for investing in them. They've become family to us, and they're also family to you. And we show them pictures of people that help support and things like that, and they do want to extend their thanks for your investment in them, because it's made a difference in their lives.
So one of the wonderful things that had happened, okay, I'll trade you. One of the wonderful things that had happened in the story I wanted to end with was the championship day. You know, we always have these plans that, we had a sound system there, and we were going to speak to everybody that was there and everything else, and this incredible storm came through and just almost made it impossible to even carry out what we were planning to do. But there was a school nearby, and one of the kids came up to me and said, "Can we go to this school and talk to the kids?" I said, "Sure." We didn't plan that. I sent a couple pastors with the kids, and they went to the school. And the American kids, they gave their testimony, and at the end they gave an invitation. And over 260 kids responded and came forward that wanted to follow Christ. We spent time with the director of the school, and now we're coming back on Tuesdays to have discipleship classes for these children. But how in the world did 260 kids come to Christ, and that wasn't part of your plan? How does that happen? Coming home, I always like to figure stuff out. If you turn to Luke chapter 10, and we're real familiar with verse 2, Luke chapter 10, and we've read this verse a lot, and I'll read from the New Living Translation. These were his instructions to them. The harvest is great, but the workers are few. Luke 10:2. So pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers into the fields. I started wanting to find out, how is it that some places you see these incredible harvests, and other places it feels like you struggle? And as I was reading this verse, it dawned on me that maybe I really need to find out what the verses on each side of this verse have to tell me. In chapter 10 of Luke, it starts out that the Lord has chosen 70 other disciples. Now, some of you might have a translation that says 72, and there's some manuscripts discrepancies, but I'm going to tell you why I think it was 70 and why numbers matter. If you turn back to Genesis chapter 10, and in Genesis chapter 10, we see on Noah's sons, his three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And in chapter 10, we see a genealogy. And he works out that genealogy. And if you were to count every one of these descendants, and in verse 31 it says of chapter 10, now these were the descendants of Shem, identified by clan, language, territory, and national identity. These are the clans that descended from Noah's son, arranged by nation, according to their lines of descent. All the nations of the earth descended from these clans after the great flood. There were 70 nations. And historically, the Jews today, when they think of countries and so forth, they think of the world a little different than we do, because they think of the world, the Gentiles, that there are 70 Gentile nations in the world. And that's how they look at the descendants of Noah. And so I really believe that number that Jesus appointed was 70, not 72, that 70 does matter. In Numbers chapter 11, when Noah was struggling with the people to answer their questions and to help him in leadership role to manage what was going on, he said, go out and choose 70 elders. 70 elders. So there are 70 nations divided, that God has divided in the world, the Gentile world. And there are 70 elders who oversee the nation of Israel. And so when we go back to the first verse, it says, Jesus appointed and chose 70 other disciples. Now we talk about the 12. In the chapter right before this, Jesus commissions and picks 12 disciples, sends them out to do the very thing that he sends out the 70 to do here. And in Luke, from chapter 11 to 18, we read about events that we don't read in any other gospel. So when you read, there are a few verses that refer to a couple stories, but the events and the inside of what's taking place. This is the last 6 months of Jesus' ministry. He has 6 months left before he goes to the cross, and he decides he needs a little help. So I'm going to send out 70 disciples ahead of me in two to go out and prepare the harvest for when I come. We don't know who the 70 were. They weren't named. And what he was asking them to do was pretty amazing, because we think of the first outreach to the Gentile nations was in Acts chapter 10 with Cornelius. But Jesus had left Galilee for the last time, and he's crossed the Jordan, and he's in the Perea area. And he's ministering the last 6 months in the Samaria area and in this Gentile area before he goes back for the final triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And he sends out these men. And he says, the harvest is great, but the workers are few. So pray the Lord, who is in charge of the harvest, ask him to send more workers into the field. One of the keys that I took away from this is quite simple, that our problem here around in the United States is not that people aren't open to the gospel. The problem is a labor issue. And as I travel, historically, places, inner city and prisons and violent, every place that I go, that we would typically think that people are very hardened to hear and talk about Jesus, are where I'm seeing incredible harvest. Jesus is the one who's in charge of the harvest, who spiritually can see into areas far greater than we can. And he tells the disciples, they have this argument early on with the Samaritan woman. He says, do not say that in 4 months we'll have a harvest. My harvest is a little different. My growing season's a little different than yours. I'm telling you, it's white unto harvest. And so we have a labor issue. I wrote down 4 things in my Bible that I kind of learned from this passage. He goes on to say in verse 3, now go and remember that I am sending you out as lambs among the wolves. First thing that I learned, that there is power, undeniable power, when we work as a team. Every time we go over to Kenya, I really don't know in detail the giftedness of the team that comes with me. And it always amazes me how God gathers the team together, and when we get over there, he places burdens upon their heart into where they can naturally give and minister to in areas and skill sets that they have. Last time I was there, I had a farmer with me. I had no idea that he went to diesel mechanic school. And we were having all kinds of issues with all of our vehicles. I'm the least person to ever touch anything mechanical. I just pray for things. And he was able to fix all of them. Here we go, and we have an engineer who's able to look at the report and see some discrepancies, and they didn't ask the right questions, and he wanted to know why they didn't do this test and that test. I remember talking with Jonathan, and he was so amazed. He said, I thought I would never get the opportunity to use my degree for the Lord. He was excited. The little girl who was a nurse and went into the medical clinic, and we get there, which is typical the way Kenya do things. The nurse pointed at her and tells her that she needs to treat these patients over here. That's a little different for nurses to diagnose and to treat. And we did blood work, and that mother had HIV and the baby had malaria. And she was so excited. She said, I didn't know that medicine could be so fun. Isn't it amazing the power and the dimension that comes along when we work as a team? God did not want us to look alike. He wanted diversity. The second thing that I noticed was in verse 2, it says, so pray to the Lord who is in charge of the harvest. Ask him to send more workers. Our prayer works because the one that we pray to is working. That's why our prayer works. Our prayer works because the one we're praying to is working. Now notice who's in charge of the harvest. Pray to the Lord who's in charge of the harvest. We think we're in charge. We think our plans and our strategies and stuff like that is what matters. And I was reminded again that God's strategy was to work through this little 17-year-old girl who was from Ohio to burden her heart to say, can we go into that school? What if I said no, we hadn't made arrangements to go talk to them? Isn't that what we do? We have our plans and strategies, and if it just doesn't quite fix or it interrupts things that we're doing, that we just don't go. All we did was ask a question. See, it's interesting in Kenya that a lot of the schools are built by religious groups or organizations, NGOs, but they find out that running a school is really expensive. And so at some point in time, they give the school back to the government to run. They'll have Christian names, and they'll have Bible classes, and children know about Jesus, but they've never been asked the question, now that you have all this information, what are you going to do with it? Are you willing to follow this man and his teachings? And all we had to do was ask the question. The Lord of the harvest is in charge of the harvest. It's interesting when we pray, when I look at the Lord's Prayer, I look at it as 57 words that have changed the world. And in that Lord's Prayer, as we go through that, we see there's lots of power, but there's this casualness of just having a conversation. And I got to thinking, every time we have a conversation with God, it's amazingly powerful, according to Scripture. Jesus can burden us and tell us to heal. He can have us go. He can have us cast out demons. And that's the power of a conversation. Prayer is kind of like a barometer about our knowledge for the Father. If I think God is tight-fisted, if I think he's distant, if I think that any of these elements are there and I'm having these thoughts, I have no reason to get on my knees before the Father. But if I think my God is generous, and my God is compassionate, and my God cares, then I have reason to go to my knees, because I have a resource I don't have otherwise. One of the third things that I learned here in verse 3, I love it. He gets 70 people. He gets them all jacked up for a mission trip. He's getting ready to send them out. They got to be excited. I mean, they weren't part of the 12. Everybody knows who the in group is, right? You know who that group is at school or at work. They're just all talk together and stuff. So here's 70 outside the in group. And Jesus is commissioning them the same way. And he says, I'm Lord of the harvest. I want you to pray. He got them praying. And he says, go. Oh, by the way, verse 3. Now go. And remember that I'm sending you out as lambs among the wolves. Oh, by the way, it could be dangerous. Don't you love that? Sometimes we forget about the danger. I was up in Omaha, North Omaha, and I was going to a halfway house, and I realized that I knocked on the door the wrong way. Because you got a po-po knock, and you got a knock that, anyway. It dawns on me I'm knocking wrong, and I'm trying to locate this guy who got out of prison. And so I do the next thing to be safe. I step way back off the porch, and I show my hands. And I said, I am not a cop. And as I walk into the door, there's a guy behind the door with a knife. Sometimes we just clumsily go along and we forget about the battle that we're fighting and what's taking place and what's it cost. But when I think of that, I mean, is it really dangerous if sheep are among wolves if you got a shepherd? Isn't that his job to protect? Isn't that the shepherd, David, the king, the warrior, who had a sling, who protected the flock, who killed lions with his bare hands, who defeated Goliath, a shepherd? So why would I ever fear as a sheep among wolves if I have a shepherd? He has weapons I don't have. He has a will and an army of angels that will surpass any army that there ever was. So do I really need to fear or be afraid? He goes on, and it's interesting where he tells them, it says, don't take any money with you, verse 4, nor a traveler's bag or an extra pair of sandals. Here's all this stuff. When we go on trips, you want to pack everything when you go to Africa. Make sure you don't forget nothing. Forgetting baby wipes could be dangerous or uncomfortable. All those things that you got to have. Why in the world would he tell them, don't take money with you, don't take a bag with you, don't take all these things, don't worry about what you're going to eat, don't go around from house to house and find out who the best cook is. Whoever opens their door. Remember back then, there wasn't any hotels to go to stay at when you traveled, and there wasn't a restaurant to get something to eat. You depended upon the hospitality of a neighbor. And they're just going and knocking on doors, hoping somebody would feed them. But what I learned is that we're not to delay. All those things that we think we have to have delay us. Remember going back to the time where we went to Houston? What happened? We were without electricity. People began to panic. I got meat in the freezer. It's going to go bad. I got all these things. And people had to make a decision whether to go with electricity off or not. Remember that? And everybody went. And what a blessing it was. He goes on to say in verse 13, he names some cities. He says, what sorrow awaits Chorazin and Bethsaida, for if the miracles did in you had been done in wicked Tyre or Sidon, their people would have repented of their sins long ago, clothing themselves in burlap and throwing ashes on their head to show their remorse. Yes, Tyre and Sidon will be better off than on the judgment day than you. And you people of Capernaum, Jesus did a lot of ministry there, did a lot of miracles, did a lot of teaching, spent a lot of time there. Will you be honored in heaven? No. You will go down to the place of the dead. And he says to the disciples, anyone who accepts your message is also accepting me. Anyone who rejects you is rejecting me. Anyone who rejects me is rejecting God who sent me. Here's 3 towns. Chorazin, we don't hear of it again in Scripture. But we know a lot about Bethsaida, we know a lot about Capernaum, and Jesus spent a lot of time there. He did a lot of miracles. So why is there such judgment on these places? It wasn't that they attacked Jesus. It wasn't that they were part of those who arrested him. Their sin was this: they ignored Jesus. Oh, Jesus is in town again. That's okay, I've seen it before. I got some stuff to do around the farm. Oh, I got this great show I want to watch. I don't have time. Jesus is in town. Think of the incredible sin of ignoring what God wants you to do. It'll be better for you than Tyre and Sidon will have on Judgment Day. The last thing that I learned here, verse 17, they come back and they give a report. Mission trip's over. When the 70 disciples returned, they were joyfully reported to him, Lord, even the demons obey us when we use your name. And Jesus said, yes, I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. It's kind of a weird verse in the middle of that. I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning. Look, I have given you the authority over all the power of the enemy, and you can walk among the snakes and the scorpions and crush them. Nothing will injure you, but do not rejoice because evil spirits obey you. Rejoice because your names are registered in heaven. Here's the last thing that I learned about this passage. Jesus had a need to prepare some disciples for a multi-ethnic future. Think about these Jews following Jesus. We know Peter had an issue with eating stuff that was unclean. He's sending them to nations and villages and places where they're going to eat different than them, where their customs were absolutely different than them. Their lifestyle was different. They spoke different languages. There was a common language of Hebrew, but they spoke Greek and other national languages. But he's preparing them for a multi-ethnic ministry. I think about America right now. We don't like to think about this, but where are we in the United States? Do you know in the United States there are 350 different languages spoken? $350. We are the melting pot of the world. That's where we're at. Whether we let anybody else in or not, that's where we're at. There's more Haitians in the west side of Chicago than there is in Haiti. $350 different languages. What's our response? I think God's trying to teach the church how to love people who are different than them. And there's a lot of really different people out there, isn't there? There's some really different people. Whereas socioeconomically, do you know in the state of Missouri, legally, there are 242,000 immigrants in the state of Missouri that speak 19 different languages. They work. They earned $340 million in 2017. You can look this up. They paid $1.6 billion in taxes. We live in a multi-ethnic society. So how do we love people who are different than us? It takes lots of prayer. He told the disciples to pray about it. He says there's going to be times it might be dangerous, but I'm your shepherd. But he says, I am the Lord of the harvest, and when you're obedient, miracles took place. There were healings, and they didn't have to be afraid of Satan. They just cast him out. That's pretty bold. I just want to encourage you that as you meet individuals who are different than you, and there's some different people in Mound City, and I'm not talking about immigrants. There's just people who are different. You can look at me and say, Bruce Paul's is pretty different. But when people don't look like us, or run in our circles or act like us, then it takes much prayer. But Jesus is telling us the harvest is plentiful. Will you pray with me? Father, so thankful for today. I'm so thankful for the support of this congregation in helping establish a ministry in Kenya. God, you gave the harvest, 25 churches, thousands of people in prison, 260 kids want to follow you at this one school. God, thank you. Thank you that you're the Lord of the harvest. Lord, give us boldness to go where you want us to go, to talk to people about Jesus this week. It might be one of our employees. It might just be a friend across the street. It might be a relative. That's really hard. But give us the courage to talk about the gospel and just ask the question. Do you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God? Amen.